This I have discussed. Basically, few things from this schedule which also need to be discussed are that they are saying that as present there are 2 rotavirus vaccines, so you can use either of the 2. From hepatitis A, there are 2 vaccines again. They have killed vaccines available and live vaccines available. As far as IAP says that both vaccines you should give 2 doses, because the live ones they claim that 1 is good enough, but as far as IAP is concerned they say 2 of both. Varicella, there is little change. They are trying to say that if you postpone it beyond 15 months, the breakthrough varicella doses infections may be less, and still recommending the second dose at around 4 to 5 years. Boosters are same. As you can see that Prevnar, PCV, has also been included in the routine. This is the schedule which I am showing for routine vaccination. Typhoid, yes, every 3 years you need to give. And then there are 4 boosters. Now there is booster of DPT, polio, oral. So this is OPV3. OPV 0 at birth, 1 at 6 months, 2 at 9 months, and 3 at 4.5 to 5 years. Second dose of MMR is recommended, as was said. It is the better way to do it at 4.5, 5 years. Chicken pox and typhoid also to be recommended at that stage. And then if it is beyond 10 years, then you still give TD or Tdap. So Tdap is also there in the vaccination schedule. And the papilloma virus or the cervical cancer vaccine only for girls, ladies at this point of time, and 3 doses, 0, 1 to 2, and 6 months as discussed. Now, they've also given a range. I'm sure all these charts are with you, but it's a good idea to keep them on your table so that even if there is some delay in the vaccination, it can be covered up within these yellow bars. And the blue bar shows that whatever are the special children vaccination or not for routine use vaccinations. Tabulated forms are available. IAP is also saying that it is going to update these information on periodic basis, and footnotes are available, and this are also available on the website. Now this is all which has been discussed. I'll be discussing a few major changes like polio. H1N B, IAP is very clear on this that it recommends as of now that H1N B should be in National Immunization Program, and this also said that there is a need for writing a paper, consensus paper, and recommending it to government to include HIV in their schedule. Hepatitis B, there is some shift from the vaccination schedule previously which has been elucidated. Now coming to 2 specific vaccination recommendations, I will be discussing with rotavirus, and the next session is on pneumococcus. So rotavirus, it says that according to IAP, there is a sufficient burden of rotavirus disease in the country. Most studies though are hospital based, so we don't have community based data still. The Indian Rotavirus Surveillance Network has shown that those children who were admitted in hospital and required at least 6 hours of IV fluid, out of those admitted children in 10 centers in the country, 39% was rotavirus. So because rotavirus testing on stool is available in metropolitan cities at least, so we know which diarrhea are rotavirus at least now. So at least in our own practice basis, we start looking for rotavirus in suspected cases. According to this study, there are different strains, commonest being G2P4 according to this, 25.7%, G1P8, and other strains. According to IAP, there is no efficacy trials in India. We are looking for the trial which Dr. Chitkara said, we are waiting for the result in coming year. But from other countries, it has been shown that Mali, that means countries which are low income countries, have shown low efficacy. Countries like South Africa, Malawi has shown intermediate efficacy of 61.2% and better efficacy in US and Europe. If you look at this, those countries who have got highest mortality like Ghana, Kenya, Malawi have shown low efficacy. You can remember 50%. Mid countries have shown around 75%, and countries where the lowest mortality has shown close to 90 to 100%. But does it mean that because the vaccine is less efficacious, we should not be using? IAP says that because the numbers which will be helped by even using a moderately efficacious vaccines are huge, we still should be using this vaccine in our country. And because we don't have efficacy data from our own country, we do have immunological data, but efficacy data is not there. We have to extrapolate data from other neighboring countries of similar demographic profile and look at the immunological data from our country. Because Gladstone study, which was discussed just few minutes back, shows that there is a need to increase the dose. We are not like Mexico, where 2 infections itself are able to prevent more severe diarrheas. Gladstone has shown that even 3 infections, natural, have been able to see serious infections by 79% only. So we need to increase the dose or number of doses or delaying the dose or even considering neonatal immunization. Neonatal immunization, because there's a vaccine which is Indian vaccine, if I can say that, is claimed to be neonatal vaccine immunization, so it's also saying it may be used. Because this Vellore study, which was one of the most extensive surveillance study done from rotavirus from any part of the world, then baby children were selected right at birth and stool samples were collected every fortnight, and then those who were getting diarrhea were samples were collected even more often. So something like 1.5 lakh samples of stools were collected for rotavirus, and then they came to this conclusion that yes, in Indian settings, maybe even more severe infections may happen despite 3 natural infections. Now, we have some immunological data from our country which IAP has illustrated. This is data which is on 116E vaccine, which is Indian vaccine, which was started from AIIMS. It is a project of ICMR. And this vaccine has been tested in 2 ways. It's efficacy trial as well as dose escalation. They were checked whether the dose of 10⁴ focus forming units versus 10⁵ and 2 doses versus 3 doses. So what immunological data means, serological conversion, IgA, rotavirus, anti-rotavirus antibodies. They have shown that with 3 doses, we are able to have 89.7% seroconversion. If you're using 10⁵ FFUs, and if you're using 2 doses, then it is 67.7%. And also the higher the dose, that means 10⁵, giving you more protection compared to 10⁴, even if you're using 3 doses. So the consensus from this is that maybe for our country, you need to use more dose and more number of doses. This is the paper which was published in 2008, and it's available for everybody's discussion. Now, even administering vaccine at younger age for our country may lower the immunogenicity of the vaccine. This is extrapolation of information which has come from study from Mahdi acids, basically done in South Africa, in which they have said that maybe there's interference of maternal antibodies, and because our schedule is recommending vaccine at 6 weeks, maybe even this may be an issue as far as the efficacy of vaccine is concerned. This is that paper which was published in 2010 in NEJM. Now, it also, IAP-COI says something about the seroconversion rates, like again immunological data for the 2 vaccines which are available in our country, like RV1 and RV5 vaccines. Now, if we look at RV5 vaccine, which clinicaltrials.gov gives you the details of that, there were 102 subjects. This was done in 4 centers, Mumbai, Pune, Jaipur, and Delhi, and it did show that the efficacy of this 3 doses was 82.4% seroconversion. Again, IgA antibody rise. If you look at the other study which was done on RV1 vaccine, which is a PGI based study, 363 subjects, 182 in both arms, which was a GSK sponsored study, it showed that the efficacy, the serological efficacy was 58.3%. So there was some difference in efficacy of the 2 immunological data from our country. And as I said already, that 116E showed of the range of 89.7%. It also says that as such, we don't have any immunological data for 6 and 10 week schedule. These trials which have been done, whether it is RV5 or RV1 or 116E, all of them have started vaccinating at 8 weeks. Nobody has done vaccination even at 6 weeks. So we don't have efficacy data, fine. Even for immunological data, we don't have any study which starting at 6 weeks. So whatever we are extrapolating is extrapolating to 6-10 schedule or 6-14 schedule from 8 to 10 weeks schedule. And we understand seroconversion is not a direct proxy of efficacy. We need to have efficacy data, but we can say that if there is no immunological data, if there is no immunogenicity, efficacy is not expected. But yes, if immunogenicity is there, still efficacy may not be good enough. So this is the data which is from Latin America. They have shown that if the immunological conversion is 61 to 95%, then clinical efficacy is 85%, which has been documented in other parts of the world. We don't have similar data for our country, but there is something which are saying that, okay, if you are trying to use vaccine at 6 weeks, then the issue may be more. You may be using it at later, then the issues may be because of antibody transfer from the mother, issues may be less, And if you're using 6, 10, 14 week schedules, what is WHO saying that you may have to use 3 doses of RV vaccine, whether it is RV1 or RV5. So finally, committee feels that as far as rotavirus is concerned, we need to introspect our strategies to combat this disease because of comparatively low efficacy of this vaccine, no efficacy data from our country, immunological data which is saying that you need to have 3 doses to be given with higher dose. Now there is some data from neighboring country like Bangladesh. This is RV5 efficacy data which has shown that there is 48.3% protection from RV5 vaccine in Bangladesh, and RV2 vaccine again in Bangladesh, which is shown a seroconvertibility of 35.1%, but efficacy of 28.4% or 39% or 36.9%. So there is some data from neighboring countries to show efficacy. There is no data from our own country. Versus homotypic and heterotypic. Homotypic means getting protection against your own serotype which is present, and heterotypic getting protection against the different serotypes also. It has been shown from immunological experts that if you have a vaccine which is having all the strains, then there is likely that G1 will remain. And if you have only one strain, then the other strains may predominate. So there are immunological issues which are involved. Whether what clinical sense they make on day-to-day practice is not very clear, but yes, there are some immunological issues involved in this. This has come from this. So we need to have a better understanding of homotypic and heterotypic immunity, because the 116E vaccine is G9VP4 vaccine. So that is also a single strain vaccine. Whether it is good enough, and as we said that always more serotypes may come up if you use a vaccine, whether we always need to have heterotypic immunity to have a vaccine which is used all over the country throughout years and for many years to come, are the issues which needs discussion. As far as safety of this vaccine is concerned, up till now we have been saying that both vaccines are absolutely safe, but IAP says that it does increase the risk of interception, which is not of the tune of 1 into 10,000, which was initially said from RotaShield vaccine. But yes, from current vaccine, it does increase incidence of interception by 1 to 2 per 1 lakh vaccinated children. Now, there is some PMS data from RV1 vaccine, because RV1 vaccine was licensed throughout world at the same time, including India. So Indian children were also part of PMS study. There were 13 cases of interception associated with that. And RV5 also, there were 2 cases reported in only 5 months surveillance data in India. So it is there. That is why IAP has said there is a small risk of interception following use of current generation of rotavirus vaccine. But benefits of prevention of severe diarrhea and death are so many, so we should not be scared of interception. As such, it is widely believed that the baseline incidence of interception in our country is much lower than Japanese and US population. You must remember this, that if there is a history of interception in past, then it may be an absolute contraindication for using RV vaccine, whether it is RV1 or RV5. This is an addition, this is a change in practice which have been added from what was there available as recommendation before. So these are the immunization timetable changes. Just for your revision, this is my last slide so that I have some time for discussion. Polio, we have got sequential vaccination now. OPV at birth, because maternal antibodies, they don't lead to emergence of vaccine-derived poliovirus or vaccine-associated paralysis. So OPV at birth is fine. 6-10 weeks is IPV. If you are delaying it to beyond 2 months, which many of us who follow AAP schedule, you may be delaying it beyond 2 months, and even 2 doses 2 months apart of IPV is good enough. Then you give a OPV at 6 months, 9 months, and 4.5 to 5 years. And the pulse polio programs which keep on happening, they still should be given. Hepatitis B, birth dose is very important, because now the hospital deliveries have increased. Birth dose means within 24 hours. 6 weeks, which is with the first DPT, rotavirus and whatever vaccines are using. And then 6 months is the better schedule than the earlier 0, 6, 14-week schedule. Rotavirus interception history in past should be added as an absolute contraindication for this vaccine usage. Pneumococcal, I'm sure this will discuss more. Prematurity and very low birth weight are added high-risk categories for this vaccination. Influenza guidelines are already in place. I have some questions. I have some time left. Thank you so much.
answer, but limit them to IAP or CI guidelines.
Yes. Yeah.
Is there any relation of age of vaccination of rotavirus and increased incidence of associated complications?
Right. I think I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. IAP says that you should not use the first dose beyond 14 weeks and 6 days and the second dose beyond 8 months, 32 weeks. Now, the latest, this is IAP COI, and if you read the latest WHO sage on this issue, they are saying that it is under consideration. I'm not saying it's a recommendation. It is under consideration that this limit may be exceeded because they feel that the risk of interception is so small, 1 to 2 cases per 1 lakh population, compared to the benefit which you may get from getting some effect. And this is WHO, so all over the world, of severe diarrheas and all. But as far as today, IAP COI concerned, don't use vaccine beyond 14 weeks and 6 days, first dose, and then second dose, 32 weeks. Because if you use later, interception risk may increase. That is a theoretical risk.
The session, I would like foremost as an organizer to thank Dr. Pankaj to be sticking well in time. So a huge big thanks for that.
Well, half of the work was already done.
Yeah, I'm sure. We would like to honor Dr. Pankaj. Dr. Gaba is here amongst us, who's a senior pediatrician of IAP West Delhi. Dr. Gaba, sir, please.
Well, friends, we have lucky draw, first lucky draw for this evening, and we have a galaxy of gifts: mobile phones, landline phones, then Bluetooth, rice cookers, and I'll request Dr. Gaba to take out the first lucky person's name. सर दूसरे को तो सुनाई नहीं देगा. चल ना तो निकालो. डॉक्टर मोहिनी, प्लीज कम एंड डॉक्टर पारस डी भारद्वाज. नहीं नहीं अभी नेक्स्ट निकाल लो. तब तक हम अगली कार्यवाही शुरू कर दें. उसके बुला लेना चेयरपर्सन. ऑल्टरनेट कर लो पूरा. डॉक्टर आर मल्होत्रा. सब क्लिनिक टाइम, पीपल बैक टू क्लिनिक सर. नेक्स्ट पीपल हु आर जल्दी निकाल लो सर. वी हैव लॉट्स ऑफ ड्रॉज. रश्मि गांधी. यस यस. डॉक्टर मोहिनी, अब आप निकालें कुछ. डॉक्टर विकासदीप मदान. डॉक्टर चितकारा. राकेश चंद्र गुप्ता नहीं है मैडम, आप विकास को दीजिए तब तक. डॉक्टर चितकारा सर, आप नेक्स्ट लकी विनर हमारा निकालिए. दिस वॉज अ मोबाइल फोन विच विकास हैज टेकन. एंड ये ब्लूटूथ कौन ले जा रहा है सर? नाम बताओ. डॉक्टर पी के बेहरा. सर ये तो द्वारका में ही रहते हैं, इन्हें ब्लूटूथ चाहिए. सर डॉक्टर चितकारा सर, एक और लकी विनर निकाले आप, जिनको हम राइस कुकर देंगे जरा घर के लिए.
वो मैं डायल करता हूँ सर. डायल करूँ कोई है?
नेक्स्ट राउंड ऑफ गिफ्ट थोड़े ब्रेक के बाद, 20 मिनट बाद.
Dari has been earnestly making sure that all of you are kept awake other ways also, apart from the science. And he's been very enthusiastic about this gifting. So all bouquets for the gifting go to Dr. Bhandari. The next talk that we have in this session is recent trends of pneumococcal disease in the Indian context. We were supposed to have Dr. Baldev Prajapati from Ahmedabad. Unfortunately, he's down with probably malaria, if I understand right. So instead of him, we have Dr. Ajay Darbar, who will be talking on these recent trends of pneumococcal disease in Indian context. Dr. Ajay Darbar, please.
I'm Dr. Ajay Darbar. I'm a medical research specialist with Pfizer vaccine. Dr. Baldev Prajapati is supposed to present, as Dr. Vineet has already informed you, but instead of him, I am presenting this data. I will be taking on emerging trends of pneumococcal disease in India, and I have some updates in 2012, because in March 2012, there was a workshop held in Brazil, ISPPD, so I have some data from that. Even the Millennium Development Goal, countdown to 2015, they have released a report in month of June in 2012. So some updates from that also I have with me. So I will be sharing all those. This is going to be outlined for my presentation. Under 5 mortality and its global picture, global scenario of pneumococcal disease, cause and burden of disease, Indian scenario on under 5 mortality, as well we'll see the Indian studies on pneumococcal disease, studies on serotype 3, 6A and 19A, and the last. So this is a slide which is talking about the under 5 mortality across the globe, and where India is contributing almost 22% in the under 5 mortality across the globe, where pneumonia and diarrheal disease are the major contributor in the under 5 mortality across the globe. If we'll see the regional causes of death, so it is not surprise that the pneumonia and diarrheal disease again are the leading cause of death in under 5 age group in Southeast Asia as well as in other part of world, but it is comparatively a little higher in the Southeast Asia region. If we'll see the pneumonia episodes per child per year, almost 3/4 of all episodes of pneumonia occur in 15 countries in the world, where India is having the highest burden of pneumonia and pneumococcal disease. This is again a WHO statistics which talks about the vaccine preventable death under 5 year of age group, which says that pneumococcal and rotaviral disease remain the leading cause of vaccine preventable death in the under 5 age group of population, and where the pneumococcal contribution is almost 32%, and whereas the diarrheal disease contributes almost 30% in the under 5 mortality. So what has changed in the Indian context of the under 5 age mortality in last 5 years, because of the report in the by the countdown to 2015, which is published in June this year. As per this study, I have compared the two things on under 5 mortality, what has changed from 2005 to 2010, and as per this report, there is an increase of 43% in the contribution of under 5 mortality by the pneumonia and pneumococcal disease, and there is a declining trend in diarrheal disease episode in the under 5 mortality. So this is what has changed in the last 5 years in the under 5 mortality scenario in our country specific. This is Indian epidemiology, as it has already discussed in the last two sessions, and IAP recommendation has been also discussed. So I'm going to take over only the Indian studies which are showing the significant prevalence of specific serotypes as well as serogroups in Indian scenario. This is first study by Johnson et al., which is presented in ISPPD Brazil this year, and they have reviewed almost 62 studies published from India in the duration of 2005 to 2011, and as per these studies, the pneumococcal etiology in pneumonia goes up to 20%. So there will be 20% cases of the pneumonia which are due to the pneumococcus as per this study. And again, if we'll go on the pneumococcal meningitis, because there was a statement from Dr. Chitkara that we don't know that what is the cause of meningitis in our country. So as per this study, when they have analyzed these 62 studies, pneumococcal etiology responsible for meningitis goes up to 39%, from 27 to 39%. So this is again a good data which we have from our country. And as per this study, more than 50% of pneumococcal death occur in 4 states, namely UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and Rajasthan. So these are the 4 countries where maximum pneumococcal deaths are happening. If we'll go for the pneumococcal meningitis death, again the 4 states are responsible for more than 50% of the meningitis deaths due to pneumococcus, namely Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, West Bengal, and Bihar. So this is the data which we got from ISPPD Brazil. If you see the IBIS study, as there was a discussion on IBIS study also, that the coverage of available vaccine as per the IBIS study is almost 55 to 60%. But I would like to highlight one more point here, that in IBIS study, serogrouping was done for Streptococcus pneumoniae, not the serotyping. So serotyping is the specific indicator where we can assess that the coverage of specific vaccine available in the country. And in this IBIS study, 6 centers were involved from the country, where meningitis and septicemia were responsible for highest fatality. If we'll talk about the serogroup prevalence in this study, serogroup 6 and 19 were the reported almost 32.7% of the cases in the IBIS study. So it is not wise to compare the coverage provided by the available vaccine in the country. Sorry. This is again ANSOP study, which is published in 2012. And as per this study, in Asian scenario, serotype 19F, 19A, 6, 3, these are the major serotypes which are prevalent in Asian scenario, which is almost similar finding to the Indian country as well. Just a minute. Thank you. So this is the ANSOP study, which is showing a similar kind of scenario, which is similar to the Asian countries scenario. In ANSOP study, again 19A and 19F was having a significant prevalence in India as well as in other 11 Asian countries. Other studies has been also conducted in recent past. These are the studies which are showing significant presence of different serogroups. So up to this era, I mean to say that 2012, there were so many studies conducted from India, and as per the Johnson et al. Study, they have reviewed almost 62 studies published in various journals from India. So we have ample of data on Streptococcus pneumonia from our country as well. But till 2012 or the early of this decade, there were only serogrouping was done for Streptococcus pneumoniae, and we were not having a serotype specific prevalence in our country. Recently in ISPPD Brazil, 2 studies were presented from India. One is from PGI Chandigarh by Dr. Meena Sharma, which talks about the nasopharyngeal carriages and serotype distribution of Streptococcus pneumoniae. And in this study, they found that serotype A, B, C are responsible for almost 26% of the total isolates they found in their study period. And surprisingly, they found that 7.4 isolates in the study period belongs to multi-drug resistant isolates. So this is one more cause of concern which is increasing day by day globally, the multi-drug resistant for the Streptococcus pneumonia isolates. This is Pneumonet study which is again conducted in southern part of India, and this is as per this study, the highest incidence of IPD were reported in the age group of 6 months to less than 1 year, which is almost 49.85%. And in this Pneumonet study, they found 14 isolates total, 36 were serotyped, and as per the Pneumonet study, the serotype 3, 6A and 19A are responsible for almost 30% of the isolates found in the whole study period of 2 years. In this Pneumonet study also, they found some antimicrobial resistant pattern also, and some serotypes are multi-drug resistant, namely 14, 6B and 19A. So this is the data of Pneumonet study. These are the 2 vaccines which are available in our country specific scenario. One is 13-valent and one is 10-valent vaccine, and there is always a debate on the prevalence or the presence of these 3 serotypes, 3, 6A and 19A. So I will share with you some more studies which are showing a significant presence of these 3 serotypes in our country specific scenario. Though we don't have much studies from our country, still we need to develop a better surveillance system from our country to see that what are the serotypes prevalent in our country specific scenario. Still, but I will share with you some studies. This is first slide on 19A, and these are the studies which are showing a significant prevalence of serotype 19A in our country specific scenario, where ANSOP study, as per ANSOP study, 2/3 of 19A isolates belongs to ST320 clone, which is a multi-drug resistant clone. So again, multi-drug resistance towards the strep pneumonia isolates is increasing day by day, which is again a cause of concern for management of Streptococcus pneumoniae. And as per the pneumonia study, 8% of IPD isolates belongs to 19A serotype, where in IBIS study, this was the third commonest group, serogroup, which was having a significant prevalence of 11%. If we'll go for North India specific data, this is again a study from Safdarjung Hospital and VP Chest Institute by Dr. Malini Sharif. And as per their study also, they found 8% of their isolates belongs to 19A serotype. So this is what only 5 studies are there which are showing a significant presence of serotype 19A in our country specific scenario. So this is how serotype 19A is important for the practitioners because its prevalence as per the other study accumulatively it's almost 13%. If we'll take the ANSOP data, it belongs to multi-drug resistant clone which is ST320 and it is responsible for complicated cases of pneumonia as well. These are the studies which are showing significant presence of serotype 6A in India. First study is pneumonia study where serotype 6A was in the highest incidence of 17%. IBIS study, again in IBIS study this serogroup was having the highest presence in the IBIS study, which is almost 22%, and we don't know what is the serotype specific data for IBIS study. Matthew MS et al. One more study which talks about the ophthalmic infection. In this study, 6A was responsible for 12% of the infections in the Indian children. If we'll talk about the specific presence of serotype 3 in India, there are a study conducted from the duration of 1987 to 2011, and there are 6 studies which are showing significant presence of serotype 3 in India as well. As per the pneumonia study, it was responsible for 6% of IPD isolates, and there are other studies also which are showing a significant presence of serotype 3 in Indian scenario. This is one more study from Lady Hardinge Medical College, Kalavati Sharan Hospital, which talks about that serotype 3 was also present in 13.4 of the invasive isolates in the study period, and there were some other isolates were also found during this study by Dr. Lakshmi et al. So this is what is the data from Indian scenario, which talks about that these are the serotypes which are prevalent in our country specific scenario, but there is always debate on the 3 serotype, 3, 6A and 19A, because we don't have much data from our India, but still we have 62 studies which are reviewed by Johnson et al. And these are the few more studies which I have shared with you, which are showing a significant prevalence of different serotype of Streptococcus pneumonia in India. And this is again a IAP recommendation which came into the month of July, already discussed in the past 2 sessions. And as per this study, this recommendation also, seroprevalence of 19A is confirmed in India as per the recent studies. They have reviewed data of ACP study as well as the pneumonia study and some other studies from India. And the committee believes that 19A will be a critical factor to determine that which vaccine is appropriate to use in the country, because there are countries which are having an example that even a 1 serotype can make a huge difference in the coverage provided by the available vaccines. We can take an example of Hong Kong, where because of serotype 3, there was a difference of almost 30 to 40% in the coverage provided by the available vaccine. I'm talking about 7-valent, 10-valent and 13-valent vaccine. And there was a difference of more than 30% just because of 1 serotype. So if we'll take an Indian scenario, the population is very huge, and even a 1% can make a huge difference in the coverage provided by the available vaccine. So this is what is the 19A scenario. This is one more thing which I thought to share with you, that the pneumococcal vaccine and the prevention of pneumococcal disease has gone into the newer horizon, where this 13-valent vaccine is now indicated in the use for the older adults 50 years and age and above. So this is a newer scientific update which I thought to share with you. And this is how I want to conclude my presentation, that serotype 3, 6A and 19A are having significant prevalence in our country specific scenario, which are responsible for IPD, and globally the data is also similar to the Indian scenario, where preventive strategies for coverage against these 3 serotypes may be having a better impact on the disease burden. So this is second point which I thought to share with you. And pneumonia study can be considered as a latest Indian data to assess the serotype coverage provided by the available vaccines of choice. So this is what I thought to share with you. Thank you. And now it is open for any question answer.
Dr. Ajay, can I request Dr. Neeraj Kumar from Chandigarh to honor Dr. Ajay Darbar? Thank you.
To help in the next lucky draw, Dr. Vasudev, please take out the name of the winner.
Dr. Neeraj.
Itni fixing. सुनील भटनागर हैं सर हैं MP गुप्ता जी सर ये सीट्स तो फ्री नहीं चलेंगे इधर बैठने वाले
I hope all the people who had gone out are going to come in soon, because now we are going to start our session on nephrology. And as you can see, during this session, we will basically be covering two important topics that we see in day-to-day practice. One will be the treatment and prophylaxis of UTI, and the other would be management of VUR, both medical versus surgical. For this session, we have amongst us Dr. R.N. Srivastav, who will be moderating the session. And Dr. R.N. Srivastav is no stranger to all of you. He retired as head and professor of pediatrics from AIIMS, and now he is into private practice at Apollo Hospital, and he was probably one of the pioneers in pediatric nephrology in the country, and he's mentored so many people after him to take up nephrology and make it a flourishing subspecialty. So I would invite Dr. R.N. Srivastav on stage, sir, please. And the panelists that we have for the day, or rather the speakers that we have for the day, are Dr. Anand Vasudev, who will be speaking on UTI. Dr. Vasudev is a pediatric nephrologist, and he is attached to both Apollo Hospital and the Max group of hospitals, and he's just recently come back from the Southeast, having done a hugely successful conference participation there. Then we have Dr. Bagga and Dr. Vireshwar Bhatnagar, both from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Dr. Arvind Bagga is a professor of pediatrics and a pediatric nephrologist from AIIMS, and Dr. Vireshwar Bhatnagar is a pediatric surgeon and head of pediatric surgery at AIIMS. They will be talking on the various aspects of management of VUR, both medical versus surgical. So I would request Dr. Vasudev, Dr. Bagga, and Dr. Bhatnagar to be on stage. Dr. Bagga, Dr. Vasudev. Dr. Bhatnagar is here, sir. He is just sorting out some issues.
Welcome to this very important session on UTI. It's a very common problem. All of you have seen, managed all this. But by and large, it's a condition which is, I would say, not very well managed. not suspected or overdiagnosed and not managed very well. A number of reasons for that. But it's nevertheless very important. I think Dr. Vasudev will talk about the UTI in general, and then Dr. Bagga and Dr. Bhatnagar will talk about the very common problem, which is a VU reflux, how to investigate and how to manage and all that. So I request Dr. Vasudev to talk briefly about UTI, the problem in general.
At the onset, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me and giving me a chance to interact with you on, as Dr. Srivastava has already said, on a very important topic and a very common topic. For the forward and pointer. And I know that we can continue and go on and on, but I'll try to be brief and finish in 20 minutes. This is a different slide being projected there. Okay, fine. Okay, that's it. Fine. Now, as Dr. Srivastava has already pointed out, that it's a common bacterial infection in childhood, and the diagnosis is often missed and sometimes overdiagnosed, and it is missed because the symptoms are very non-specific. And why are we worried about UTI? The main reason is the risk of scarring, and this scarring may cause permanent damage and also lead to sequelae of hypertension later on, pregnancy-related problems, and sometimes end-stage renal disease. And mind you, the younger the child, the more the delay in the treatment, more are the chances of renal scarring. So the aim is to catch them early so that we can prevent scarring and we can treat them promptly. This is not working. I have to work there only. This I think that will be better. Now when we come to the clinical features, again the classical symptoms are absent in young children, so we have to be very, very careful that the symptoms may not be pointing towards UTI. So it's a high index of suspicion which will lead us to diagnosis. And especially in neonates, the symptoms are not classical, it's just like presenting as a part of septicemia with lethargy, feeding problems, jaundice, unstable temperature, and all features of septicemia. While in older infants, the most common feature which we see is the recurrent fevers, but occasionally we may see children with recurrent diarrhea and vomiting also, with poor weight gain, abdominal pain. So these children, if you have these symptoms, we should suspect UTI and try investigate them. While in older children, the classical symptoms are present. Fever again is one of the cardinal features. There may be dysuria, dribbling, urgency, frequency, abdominal and flank pains, and at times there may be a recent onset of enuresis and occasionally pyuria and hematuria. Now once we have suspected UTI, we have to, initial evaluation would include assessing the degree of toxicity and dehydration. It is important because as we go on, we'll see how it is important in management. And child's ability to retain oral intake. Again, not to forget that we have to measure blood pressure in all these children, which is, I find, very uncommon in pediatric clinics to have a proper sized cuff and measuring blood pressure. It may take time, but please do when you see a renal case, especially UTI. You have to ask for a history of bowel and bladder habits. Bowel mainly related to constipation because there is a causal relationship with constipation and UTI. And bladder habits, ask for the stream, see if there is any dribbling or overflow in the bladder. The routine examination which would be required is the CBC and a serum creatinine, and if the child and infant is sick, then we need to send a blood culture of these children. Again, I find a lot of times the patients are referred to us, and when I examine, many a times it has been missed by the pediatrician, treating physician. You must look for phimosis in every boy who comes with suspected UTI or proven UTI, and in a girl child, vulval synecdoche. At times I have picked up vulval synecdoche when the children have been referred to me for MCO, and I directly see them at the MCU table, and I see that the child has synecdoche, which has not been seen by anyone earlier. Fecal foiling has to be looked into, and once you palpate the abdomen, look for any fecolis, distended bladder, any urinary incontinence, and any palpable renal mass. And please don't forget to turn the child on the prone position to see for the spine, for any swelling or tuft of hair on the lumbosacral region, and also see for any neurological deficit or a patulous anus. Now, once we have suspected, we have examined the child, we need to investigate. And urine examination, as you know, is the most important examination and investigation in the diagnosis of UTI. We can collect urine by various methods for culture. Urine bag had been commonly being used, but I wanted to emphasize here that it is strongly not recommended to use a urine bag collection. It gives a very high false positive results, and we do not advise even false negative results should not be taken as a marker. So please do not use specimen from urine bag for urine culture. The most common widely used specimen is the clean catch midstream. There is a high chances of contamination when the parents are collecting the urine. So you must spend a minute with them to explain to them how the urine is to be collected with sterile techniques, midstream urine, and washing the private parts before collecting the urine. Then a catheter sample in especially hospitalized patients is very easy. You have to maintain strict asepsis when you are putting in a catheter or feeding tube, and it is a safe and easy procedure. Suprapubic puncture, of course, is the gold standard. It does not need too much of expertise, and it needs a little experience. And our residents who have been doing lumbar punctures in the ward, I'm sure can do the suprapubic puncture very, very easily. A word about caution about once you have collected the urine for culture, the plating should be done within 1 hour. If you are in the hospital, it's most of the times the plating is possible that you send across the sample to the lab and they would do the plating. What if the sample has been taken at an odd hour, or if the sample has to be transported to a distance which is taking more than an hour? It is advised that the urine should be stored at 4 degrees temperature. Normally, I would tell the parents to keep the bottle in a polythene bag in the lower compartment of the refrigerator till they are taking the urine for depositing into the lab. Again, repeat urine culture may occasionally be required in these children. When is it required? If there's contamination is suspected. Say if there's a mixed growth of pathogens, or there's a growth of periurethral flora, especially lactobacilli in girls and enterococci in infants. So if you have these bacteria which are normal commensals and you doubt this child probably has UTI, do repeat a culture. And especially if the colony count is low and you are suspecting high suspicion of a urine infection, then again you can send the sample for a repeat culture. Once we have sent the culture and the report is back to us, we must know how to interpret this report. If you have taken a sample from a suprapubic sample, then any number of bacteria is significant. If you have taken a catheter sample, then a colony count of 50,000 is good enough, and it has a high probability of having UTI. In a midstream sample, we should have a colony count of 1 lakh colony forming units, and all these 3 methods give excellent results, and the probability is very high if they are done properly. Bag specimen, again I have mentioned here, not acceptable. Sometimes you may find lower counts, and they are important even if the count is lower than the expected, if the symptoms are persistent, if the child has been on antibiotics before he came to you, or if the child is having polyuria, maybe he's on diuretics or having polyuria. So you have to keep these in mind if the colony count is low and you have a suspicion of UTI. Again, some of the supportive evidences before you get a culture report, but mind you, they are not substitutes for cultures. The culture has to be sent, and you cannot diagnose UTI other than positive urine culture. But this may enable you to start presumptive treatment. Presence of WBC is often labeled as pus cells. This is a misnomer. If there are more than 10 WBCs in uncentrifuged specimen per millimeter cube, or more than high per 5 high power field in centrifuge specimen, they are of significance. But again, a word of caution here, that WBCs are not a hallmark of UTI alone. They may be present in other conditions like any fever.